We can, I could put on pajamas too, and we can totally do that.
Unfortunately, I don't wear anything but pajamas, so.
Oh, you're recording now, so.
All right, am I sharing my screen? Can anyone see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
No. Oh, I can't. Just see your face.
I was lying. Just kidding.
Okay, so if I hit share, yes, here it is. So I'm gonna share. Let me share my desktop with Phpstorm. That looks like it. All right. So who can see my screen now?
Yep.
Okay, I'm telling the truth. Yes, I can.
All right. So I'm gonna kind of give kind of an overview of my thought process behind this and what I want to cover. And so right now, in perpetuality, this talk is going to be kind of very loose. My thought behind this talk is there's a couple techniques that really help me, navigate Twig files to work with things within the Drupal theme system that just like make me much more effective. Sometimes I feel like these things are really hard to figure out and kind of a pain in the ass if no one shows you. And I think that gives Drupal a little bit better reputation when, at least on the front end world, which honestly, could be argued that that's deserved. But hopefully we can rectify that. So I'm going to do a couple different things, and I'm going to talk about a couple different things. And the first thing I'm going to talk about is getting variables into your Twig files, from Drupal. So Twig is pretty easy. There's curly brackets. There's the brackets that have, was it the curly brace with the % sign, and like that's not too difficult. You can do if this, then do this, etc. There's includes, embeds, blocks. All those are pretty straightforward, and I think Twig's documentation is pretty good. And if you're familiar with like any type of templating language, Twig is pretty easy to pick up. The hard part in Drupal is knowing what the variables are, So if you're going to output, say you have an entity reference and you want to, output a field from that entity reference into your template, well, how the hell do you do that? How do I know what to type in my Twig file? And so what I'm going to show is we're going to do we're going to set PHP breakpoints using Xdebug within Phpstorm, and then we're going to use that to kind of navigate ourselves into knowing what we need to type within the Twig template. And as I go through this, it's kind of complicated, but if you do it a couple times, you can kind of get the hang of it, and it works pretty well. Does that make sense? I'm seeing some nods. So
more or less.
Makes sense.
Cool. So what I'm gonna
had this 2 weeks ago.
Right? Yeah. So there's a couple things that I want to talk about first of all that I'm not going to show. So Xdebug. Xdebug is a debugger and profiler for PHP. Configuring Xdebug can be a pain in the ass. And to do so is for every local environment you have to configure Xdebug a little bit different. I know it's possible with things like Lando DDev, and most Docker-based solutions like that. And this particular environment, like what I tend to use Phpstorm because it's easy. Not Phpstorm, but MAMP. This is MAMP Pro right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to the PHP little tab down here, and I'm going to check this checkbox for Xdebug, and it's really easy. And this is honestly
too easy.
Yeah, it's a little too easy. So I'm checking that, and now Xdebug is turned on. Now Xdebug, just FYI, you only want to enable it on your on your local system because it does have a performance penalty. So we have that turned on, and hopefully you have Xdebug enabled on your own local environments. If not, you can Google on how to do that. And we are going to go into Phpstorm. The newest version of Phpstorm has native Twig debugging built in. I've yet to use that. So I'm going to show a method that uses the devel module. So if we go to devel module, if you have this installed on your local environment and your Drupal install, which you should, it provides a way to set breakpoints, and that's what we're going to use. So in this particular case, I have a local copy of the Lullabot website here, and I'm gonna, let's say I have an episode node, and this is gonna take a little bit, we're gonna bring up Kathy here. And so this has an MP3 that is a reference, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. And what we're going to try to do here is we're going to, I don't know, get a field out of the MP3. So if we look at our episode nodes, there's content types, episodes. Let's manage fields. You can see we have like a number of fields here, as a Drupal site does, and there should be a media field for the episode here. So let's see if we can see that here. Episode number.
Looking for audio media?
Yeah, am I completely missing it? Oh, it's right at the top. I was I was scrolling down. I kind of went by that. So audio media is an entity reference. And then if we look at this, let's kind of take a look here. So this entity reference is an audio reference, and if I were to create like a new episode, it would look something like this. And I'm telling you this so you kind of know what the objective is, you know, like, so we would hit add media right here, and it would bring up the little media browser. You can add audio, and then you can upload something. So basically we want to reference that, you know. So the question is, so I'm in Twig right here. Like, let's go into this template. And I'm going to show you this particular template is it should be under content, node -- episode full. So we have a whole bunch of stuff in here, right? And we know that I can do things like, you know, variable here, and it'll spit out the variable, right? So, but the question is, you know, how do I reference that? You know, like you might need to do content dot, let's see what this is called right here. If we go to it's a field audio media, you can see that up in the URL up there. So we can do like something field audio media, but then what do we put in after that? You know, because we just don't want that. We want everything. So we're going to figure that out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in devel _ breakpoint with some parentheses after that. And what that does is it's the equivalent of kind of like setting a little breakpoint within Twig. You know, I don't know if you've done any type of PHP breakpoints. So as we refresh, Twig should break right here, or like Phpstorm should break. And the next thing I'm going to do is I am going to turn on, I'm going to hit this like little telephone button up here that says start listening for Php debug connections. Now, if you've never done this before, there's some configuration that you have to do, and you can just kind of Google on how to do this. But debug, like there's some settings here that need to match up, and they probably do out of the, you know, like by default. But I just want to let you know that those are there. So, all right, so I save this, I turn this on up here. Next time I hit reload right here, it should break, and if not, I'm going to clear the cache and try again. So let's reload right here. And my computer's going, all right, so it's saved right here, and it didn't look like it broke. It didn't have a break right here, so we're going to try again. If this doesn't work, we'll do a drush CR. And you'll know if it breaks, because it'll bring up like a little debug pane. And as I said, like my local goes pretty slow here, especially if I'm doing like video chats and stuff. Get rid of this little message. So normally, like it'll spin up here, but it'll open up the debug pane. I don't think I need to bring that up or anything like that, right? Because it should automatically come up. Well, let me try it again. Like all this should not have to mess with this. Yeah. All right, so just for the heck of it, I'm gonna hit stop here. I'm gonna turn it off. I'm gonna clear the cache. All right, I'm going to, I have my listener stopped right here, so I'm just gonna hit refresh. I'm gonna try to get this going. Sometimes it can be a little bit finicky, but it's worth it once we get going. So hopefully I can like edit this out of the video and make it seem like it was just like 30 or like 20 seconds or something, right?
Yeah, make it look really good.
Yeah, all right. Or like do like some type of like high speed stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Let me try a different, maybe this is like locked up right here. All right, that loaded fine. Well, what was the difference? I'm not quite sure. All right, I'm also gonna double check and make sure I have, let's see, that's the wrong thing. I'm gonna make sure I have cache disabled in Phpstorm. I can do that by checking my settings.local. There we go. That was probably the problem. I had page caching and everything on. So we're going to clear it one more time. Now cache is turned off. And I'm actually going to log out right here. Or I'll bring this up in incognito maybe. And then we will try it with the debugger listening. All right. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to turn this on, go back, and refresh. And hopefully we'll have some luck here. Like it seems to be pausing like it's listening, like it's stopped, but I don't know why it's not popping up here. So if I were to guess right now, I would guess that there's some type of PHP configuration error here, and I'm not quite sure what's going on. It's spinning, which is normal. When you have the debugger, it like never outputs the HTML, so it just kind of holds it there.
Well, you said it was a pain in the ass.
Yeah, well, usually it's not this much of a pain in the ass. So I kind of need to figure this out. I guess this is good that we're kind of doing a dry run here.
I know I've enabled Xdebug, but I never could.
Yeah, and this is really important information. I don't kind of know. I really, maybe if I like just like quit and restart it or something like that, you know?
I never did understand the whole breakpoint thing.
Well, I'm going to explain it. I'm going to get this working. This is the most important information right here. Like a lot of people use things like Kint to do the debugging, and that's just like it's just kind of slow, you know?
Yes.
And just for the, well, I think, all right, so we're going to turn this back on up here. All right, I have my develop breakpoint in here. Let's reload.
Now the develop breakpoint, that calls on the module, the develop module,
Yeah.
and it
And
just doesn't stop, right?
I want to make sure it is break. I want to make sure I'm typing this in properly here. I'm pretty sure it is.
Ooh.
Yes, this is right. Well, this is something different. This will work here. Okay, so I'm gonna, that's not making a difference. Let me stop and reload this right here. And let me see if I can just get debugging working within the template preprocess. So we can go into here and we should be able to just kind of set this on like the, yeah, preprocess node should work. And so we're going to do this. So right now it's turned off. I want to make sure this loads up, and I'm not quite sure what's happening here. Maybe I should restart MAMP. Got this going. So it's maybe an earlier version of this. Make sure Xdebug is on. All right, this is turned on. I got that set up, so I'm gonna reload right here. We're gonna see if it breaks. If this doesn't do it, you know, I'm not quite sure what the problem is. I'm gonna, so I'm looking at the So we could try like Command 5. View tool Windows Debug. So what does it say? View tool Windows Debug. And Command 5 is doing nothing. Well, well, I don't know what to tell you here. There's a couple other things I want to talk about, but this is obviously kind of not working out. I'm gonna have to troubleshoot this and maybe try to reload Phpstorm or something like that. But I can record this and maybe kind of post that, because I think that this is pretty straightforward once it works. And so the way that it does work when it works is it'll when Phpstorm gets caught in a breakpoint, you have access to all the variables, and you can run methods from that point in the execution. So what's kind of interesting about it is, like, you can see all the arrays that are available, like all the render arrays, and instead of, and this is very similar to Kent, where you can kind of expand and contract that. But what's really cool is you can open up what's called like a live expressions pane, and you can type in PHP that runs against the current context. So I can run methods, and I can do this. The alternative in things like Kent is you type it in there, then you have to hit reload, and then you have to wait. Unfortunately here, this is kind of just being a complete pain in the ass. So I'm not quite sure what's up with this. Wonder if I turn off my op cache. I'm gonna do this one more time. That's interesting. So that's like saying like the database isn't down or up. All right, so I'm giving up on this.
I give up on it too.
Yeah, I totally would. Are either of you going to Drupal Camp Atlanta? Because it's going to work there. I'm going to make sure of it.
Maybe.
I don't know. When is it?
It's coming up in September 12th.
No, probably not.
Oh, that soon.
Yeah, it's coming up. I'm literally flying up on like a Friday morning and flying back Saturday night. So I'm gonna be up there for 2 days, but just one night.
Oh my heavens. It's like being in the military.
Yeah, it's not gonna be that bad. I mean, what, like Florida to Atlanta is only like a 30-minute flight, right?
No,
Skipping and
it's like
jumping.
a little over an hour.
Yeah.
I just got back
Mm-hmm.
from Atlanta yesterday. Day before.
Do you go up there for your job, Sarah?
No, my kin's up there.
Oh, okay. Well, that's better.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about Drupal Behaviors now. Are either of you kind of familiar with how Drupal Behaviors work?
No.
Not really.
Well, now you get to learn. So this is like super cool. So have you ever seen, like, let me find some regular social share, right? So have you ever seen like JavaScript and it has all this stuff in there where it says Drupal Behaviors, something another, and then attach and things like that?
Right.
Yeah. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through how that works. And we're going to look at the code within Drupal, and then we're going to look at the code. We're going to we're actually we can set a debugger in the browser, and we can like kind of step through. But so right here, like all this JavaScript right here, it's like if you go to, I don't know, something like an article, all it does is just kind of pop that stuff up. But it's kind of custom, so we don't like load all those crappy Facebook trackers and all that type of stuff. And but it's not important what's in here. What's important is that we're doing this. So what Drupal Behaviors does is it will run the JavaScript against everything that's on the page, right? So like you might have like, I don't know, say like a certain, you might have a view and the view has rows on it, and then every view's row, you might want to like modify that. You know, you might want to like maybe insert a button or something like that with JavaScript. And so on page load, the Drupal behaviors will run once. But what's interesting is Drupal has an Ajax system, you know, so you can do things like you can use like the Ajax Pagers within Drupal, and you can do things like views load more or something like that. Are either of you familiar with like using those or what those look like?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So what they do in general is they basically will load that new content, but without a page load. And so the question is like, if you only run the JavaScript on page load, and then you put in new content through like the Drupal Ajax system, how does the JavaScript apply to this new content? So you understand what like the problem is right there?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the problem it tries to solve. And so what it does is you register all your functions right here within Drupal Behaviors, and then on every time it does a Drupal, like every time it does Ajax is something in it, it'll apply those behaviors to that. I'm going to show you what that looks like. So within core, I'm going to go into the Drupal core directory right here, and you're going to see like core.libraries or something. Yeah, core.libraries at Yamo. So within core.libraries at YAML, you'll see Drupal right here. So this is just the base Drupal, what do you call it? Like the base Drupal JavaScript right here. So you can see it's loading a couple JavaScript files. It's loading Drupal.js and Drupal init.js. And then it has dependencies on DOM ready and Drupal settings. What DOM ready is it just detects when the page is loaded, and when the page does load, your browser will fire an event and it'll say DOM ready. And this kind of does that, although this is like way backwards compatible for some crazy stuff. It probably should be ripped out of core. Drupal settings, if you're not familiar with that, is it's a way to get like data from your PHP into JavaScript. You know, so say like I have like a color picker in PHP and I want to set like my color to something other, I can output that and then like access it in JavaScript. But we're not worried about these right now. What we're worried about is this Drupal.js and Drupal.init. So let's kind of take a look at those. So they're both in the core miscellaneous directory right here. So we're going to see all these JavaScripts in here. And so there's Drupal.js and Drupal.init. So let's look at the Drupal init right here, and we're also going to look at Drupal.js. So you're going to see within the core right here, there's that ES6.js version of the files, and those are just kind of the same files, but the regular .js version is more backwards compatible with things like Internet Explorer 11 and stuff like that. So we look at this, the first thing that it runs is Drupal. So you can kind of you can see like there's a bunch of helper functions in here, like this, like it creates the global Drupal object up here, and you can see in here it sets the behaviors, and it sets one called locale, and some helpers down here. And so you can look through the documentation right here, and it actually talks a little bit about how Drupal behaviors work and like attached behaviors and things like that. So what runs is there's like maybe it's under Drupal init right here. So under Drupal init right here, it runs this at when the browser is ready, when it runs DOM ready, it runs this attach behaviors right here. And this attached behaviors, so this Drupal init, or this attached behaviors will also run under like on Ajax events, right? So, well, it won't. Sorry, the initial the running of the behaviors will be run under Ajax, but attaching will not. So, maybe a better way to explain that is open up a debugger right here. So, if you're not familiar with like JavaScript debugging, I'm just gonna kind of pause it in mid-execution, or we could actually even like maybe even look at it right now without it. So we should be able to type in Drupal, and Drupal, if I can spell it properly, right? So you can do this on most Drupal websites right here, and under this you have the behaviors right here. And when you have your so all these functions right here will be run against each Ajax, like all the data into Ajax call. And so we can kind of take a look at like this. So this attach right here is the actual function. So you could like run like Drupal.behaviors.discus.attach with the parens after it, and it would actually execute that. When you're running the behavior, or when you're authoring the behaviors, let me bring up something that we authored right here. Just because I want something a little bit easier. You can see it's passing in some data, like this data right here, this context. And this context, when it runs the first time, is equal to is the same thing as like the entire page document, right? So like I don't know if you're familiar a lot with like just like regular vanilla JavaScript, but like normally if you're running, if you're doing like you're trying to find you know, a selector or something like that, you do something like document.query selector, you know, and then, you know, a class name in here, you know, Mike's class, and then from here, you know, you can set that, you know, you can do something like that, and then you could do like, you know, add an event listener to it or something like that, you know. But instead of using document, we're going to use context. And the reason is because up here, context is equal to the document the first time it runs. So all this JavaScript right here will most likely be run multiple times, sometimes multiple times on a page load, especially you know, if you're doing like all the Ajax stuff, or if Drupal's Ajaxing something in. So this whole block of JavaScript can run multiple times, and that could be like a little problematic, because what'll happen is you might have multiple event listeners attached to something, you know, like let me see if I'm adding an event listener here. So I might have an event listener added for that, but what'll happen if I attach multiple event listeners running the same function, what'll happen is, like, say if I click it and this JavaScript has I don't know, executed 3 times already, instead of opening one window, which is what I would expect, it would open up 3 windows, or it would do something like a little weird, you know, or it would execute 3 times. Like you might have like a toggle or something. It might like execute that toggle 3 times, and then you don't know, you don't quite have the idea of what's going on. So what we want to do is we want to ensure that this block of code only runs once. And we do that, there's a couple different ways that you can do that. But one of the easiest ways, if you're doing just like vanilla JavaScript, is to do like, you can do if, you know, context equals document. And then, you know, kind of wrap everything in an if statement right here. And that would work because it would only run once. If you have data that you might need to run multiple times, like for example, like this social share button might be Ajaxed in, you want to ensure that it's ran. You know how I said like the like on page load, the context is equal to the document. On Ajax events, the context is equal to whatever, like whatever data is, you know, your Ajax, your data that just got Ajaxed in. You know, it calls like something like data Ajax. So on an Ajax event, the Ajax will put in data, and then it'll run all your Drupal behaviors, but when it runs it, it's going to say context is equal to just this part of the HTML that it inserted in. So it's not running it against the entire HTML, it's just running it against that little section. And so you can do things like this context query selector all or something like that, if that makes sense. Am I explaining this well?
Yeah. Now, is that what they use for like chat? You know, like when you click a chat button and the little chat window pops up?
It depends. I mean, you can use Ajax for that. So Ajax is basically when you reload a window, or like when you insert content into your website without like a reload. And chat is typically doing that. Most modern chats are built like using like technologies like WebSockets and stuff like that don't do like your traditional Ajax, but you know, depending on how you define Ajax, or you know, if you define it really strictly, it wouldn't be considered that, but if you define it broadly, it could be.
This would be like the view more button.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I get it.
So like a traditional use case would be like I'm hitting that view more button. It's appending data to the bottom of my view. But every time I have that data, I want to maybe manipulate that data with JavaScript. And this is how that would be done. So this is kind of best practice to do it like this, you know, but the trick is you also want to ensure that the data only run, or like that this code only runs once if you're not doing Ajax events, if that makes sense. So another way to do this, if you're using things like jQuery, is to use what's called jQuery Once. And you can kind of see, like jQuery Once actually came out of the Drupal world, and like basically you can do your selector and then .once, and you call it whatever you want, and then put whatever you only want to run once in there.
Yes, Brian just had a question about that actually on Slack.
Yeah. There's a couple of different ways to do things in jQuery. You know, jQuery, like jQuery will also, or like Drupal behaviors, if you're using jQuery, it'll pass in jQuery. And then you can do things like, you know, selector, like, and then you have your selector, and then like, I don't know what you're gonna do, like click, and then, you know, dot 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 in here. But there's a second argument that you can put in within your selector, like what you want to search within, and within jQuery you want to put in context in here. And what that'll do is that'll tell it to search context for the selector. Other than that, it'll default to document. You know, this is kind of the default right here, even though you don't type in document right there. So if that kind of makes sense.
The key is to use context instead of document.
Yeah, yeah. You tip it. It's usually best practice to do that, but stuff can just get like a little weird when you're trying to, you know, you're like, why is this running twice? Or like you might be debugging something, and and you see it's hitting twice, and at that point, you know, you have an issue with your Drupal behaviors. An alternative is, if you don't want to do behaviors, you can just, you know, you can just like write your code like this, and it's only going to run once. But if you do this, you need to ensure that it waits until the document is ready. It's kind of a more established pattern to do Drupal behaviors. They're like, yeah.
So how is that working with like the Twitter button and the Facebook and LinkedIn?
Yeah, so we can actually watch it here. So let's open this up and open up a debugger really quick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the sources panel right here and close out some of this stuff. I'm going to hit Command P, and I'm going to type in the name of the file, which was social share. It's all minified. We gotta make it so it's not minified. Give me just a second here. But you know what? We don't even need to. We can just hit this button. Pretty print. And it's still like uglified now. So give me just 1 second. npm start. I'm in another browser here. I'm starting the process, and it should run it in dev mode. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to recompile the JavaScript here. Just going to hit this. That should trigger a compile. Yeah. And now I'm going to reload, and hopefully when I reload, the versions that I'm working with are not uglified or minified. And once again, I disabled all my caching, so it's taking a little while. Make sure I don't have this on. All right, so we can see right here, like the JavaScript is now not, some moth buzzing around me. The JavaScript is not minified or uglified or anything. So we can start kind of, if you want to see how this works, the first thing that we can do is we can actually just kind of set a breakpoint, you know? So I'm going to set a breakpoint right here, and what this is going to do for, like, if there's multiple Twitter buttons, which there are, there's one over on the left and one near the bottom. This should run twice. And so we can do this, and we can kind of see the break. So this is paused right here. You can see this is paused in debugger. Hold on a second. And over here we'll have access to like all of our scope, and you can see the call stack, and you can see how it's attached through the behaviors right here. And you can kind of see like any type of variables that are listed here. Like we have some buttons, We have a little node list for buttons that are Facebook buttons, LinkedIn buttons. There should be 2 of each. And then you can see we have some functions here. So if I hit play here, it should pause again as it loops through the second time it does, and then it should let it go. So at that point, we have these event listeners added right here, and we can actually see those in action. Let me just scroll to the bottom where everything's visible by default. So these buttons over here, you can actually see these event listeners here. Like if we select the button right here and then go to event listeners, you can see there's a click event listener right here that's added through social share. So this, when I click on that, it's going to execute the function. Now we can kind of see that in action. Like you can see, like right now, it's going to execute this function called compose tweet. So we can look for that function up here called compose tweet, and we can set a breakpoint in there. So if I hit this Twitter button right here, it should break. So all right, there it broke, and now we're in the in this compose tweet function. And so what it's doing right here is it's grabbing the title of the page, like up here where it says a patch list composer workflow. Does a little bit of regex on there to remove like the lullaby stuff. So we can see that the title text, if we look at the scope, we should see this in here. Title text equals this. I'm not quite sure why there's no var const there, but I wonder if somehow it set that to be a global. That doesn't make sense if it did. Yeah, I think it is. So I'm gonna title. No, all right. Anyway, I'm not gonna worry about that. I would expect to see the title text within the scope right here. I'm not quite sure why I don't, but not gonna worry about that. But you can see I do have access to it. If I type down here, I see like title text is this. Or hold on. Title text. You can see it says a patch list composer workflow for Drupal using forks. And then, we have a share URL, which is Twitter, and then it goes into the share data function. So, we can go look at this, and at this point, it just opens up another window. So if I hit play, you can see it should open up a window here somewhere. There it goes, with like all this data in there, and a hyperlink at the bottom. So that's kind of debugging in JavaScript, but unfortunately we didn't get Xdebug working earlier. But the point of what I was trying to talk about with the behaviors is that this whole block of code right here will run, number one, on page load, and then it'll run only against the data that gets Ajaxed in. So that's why it's important to use like things like context and stuff like that. As you can see, I'm doing right here. And so, yeah. Any follow-up questions on that or anything?
I don't think so.
Does that kind of make sense, or is it like a little bit too far?
Well, it's a little over my head, but
do you understand?
You wrote all of that, right? Where it says button Twitter equals context.
Yeah.
You actually put that in there?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so like all this type of stuff I wrote. And this is just like kind of some basic JavaScript, which honestly is kind of fun if you want to get into it, and I could recommend some resources. But basically what I'm doing is I'm just querying the web page for anything that has this CSS class, doing the same thing for anything that has this CSS class, and I'm assigning all those variables. So that's what all this is up here, and then I set an event listener to make sure it knows something. All the event listeners do is say, like, if this thing is clicked, run this program, and then this program basically says grab the title text, you know, this is to share URL, and then like, you know, pass it the data, and you know, it'll go. But Linda, do you understand?
Hang on. Sorry.
Yeah, like a grandfather clock or something?
Well, it's my phone, but you know, you tell
Oh,
people
really?
what you're doing, and then they call you.
So do you understand the problem that it's trying to solve?
Yeah, I do. I do understand that. I'm just
Gotcha.
I'm just amazed with all your stuff. I'm like,
So if you're interested
yeah,
in
how
learning,
would you know to do this? How would you know that I need to do this?
you need to start building stuff. Let me show you how to do this.
So
There's
the
this
Drupal behaviors is the part that tells it to run once, or is that the attach part?
the part that I'm gonna throw this right in here. So and Linda, I put this link in here. If you want to learn JavaScript, this is like a real easy on-ramp to learn JavaScript. It's completely free.
Yeah.
And it's vanilla JavaScript, and it's honestly kind of fun because you're building stuff.
Okay.
So the attach behaviors, I believe, just attaches it, and I think there's an init function somewhere, and we can look to see where that is. So I bet I would be surprised if it wasn't in that yet. Dot init. So no, the Drupal attached behaviors, I think, will. So this is where I believe it runs on page load, but there's another function that will run on against, like when there's Ajax behaviors, and it'll look something like this, but instead of passing in the document, it'll pass in like, you know, whatever the, you know, like new data is, you know, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So this runs, and this basically passes in the document, you know, because this is like basically this first path right here is like the equivalent of like whatever context is, and then so if it runs it again, it needs to change that. Does that answer your question or no?
Kinda.
All right. So if we look at this, we should see like the attach function has one variable coming in called context, and so that first variable right there is document. We could also pass in Drupal settings or something like that, or like things like settings. Hold on. It's pretty common to pass into Drupal settings like that too. But the document will map to the context for the very first page load, because so that's why like the document and the context are exactly the same. Like the context is just a reference to the document, but on subsequent Ajax events, the context is equal to whatever new data gets passed in.
Okay.
Is that, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Cool. And then we only want to you might want to only run this data once, or this code once, or you might want to run this code against data that's Ajaxed in, and that's how that's managed.
Okay.
Cool. So something else that is always a complete pain in the butt is so this is more of a code snippet, and I see a lot of new Drupal themers have problems with just like caching, right? Because if you make a change to your Twig file, of course it doesn't, it doesn't, you know, it won't reflect unless you have like your caching disabled. Unfortunately, within Drupal, to disable the cache is like a real pain in the ass. Well, it's not a pain in the ass, you just have to know what to do. So I'm gonna kind of show you the way that I do it right here, and it's pretty straightforward. So if you go under sites the Drupal sites folder, core ships with this file called development.services.yaml. And you can add additional things to this. You can add things like Twig Debugging and other things. But the problem is if I have this right here. So if I were to go into my development.services and add copy, paste. Am I missing something here? Copy. If I were to add this in here, this would work as soon as I use this, but the problem is with the development.services.yaml is as soon as I upgrade Drupal, it's going to kind of reset it back to where it is, the default, right? You know. So what I typically do is I have this what I call custom.services.yaml, and the only thing that's a little bit different in here is it has this Twig config in here that has things like debug true, auto reload true, and cache false. And what that does is that tells Drupal not to cache any type of Twig files. And in addition, as what was in the development.services.yaml also defines a new service that basically just like you can point your cache to something like null. So you have like Drupal has the settings.php where you would keep your secrets in and things like this, like your database passwords. But at the very end of it, there's an option for local settings, like right here. So this is this right here is your typical like end of file, but it's commented out. So if you uncomment this in your settings.php, and what that does is it says, take a look for a settings.local.php, and if you see it, just go ahead and like kind of append it in here. So what we're going to do is I have this settings.php in here where I put all my local settings, right? So you can see like my username and password, which are very, very tough to guess right there. And you can also hard code things like stage file proxy settings, and you can set things like the your file paths and your sync paths, and you can skip permissions hardening right there, which I'm pretty sure you don't want to do that on your production system, but it might be useful on your local system, right? So you have all that type of stuff. But up here, there's a couple different options that pertain to that custom.services.yaml right here. So there's this container YAML settings that I point to that right there, and that basically turns it on. So if I comment this out right here, what that's going to do is it's not even going to use that custom.services.yaml. And then I set Drupal to not pre-process any type of CSS or JavaScript, and that's pretty straightforward. And then you can turn off all types of caching right here. So there's like render, page, and then dynamic page cache. And you just set those, like the caching is still activated, the system is still there, but when it tries to cache it, it just caches it to null, which means it doesn't cache anything because you can't like really query null. So all these things in general will do things like turn on Twig debugging and stuff. And so I'm going to show you another thing that of course is like very difficult with Drupal is terminology, right? So I was talking a little bit about terminology of like debugging using Xdebug, but now I'm talking about Twig debugging. But when we do Twig debugging, it's really not debugging. It's more like figuring out what template you're going to use, right? And I'm going to show you what that looks like. So, like, as most of us who have done theming know, there's like a lot of template files. There's all types of things that you could potentially use. Stuff like this and stuff like this, and like, let's say if I want to like modify, I don't know, I have a block somewhere near the bottom right here. This is a view. I have this view right here. How do I know, I want to affect this markup, how do I know? Well, if I turn on Twig Debugging, I see these really helpful comments right here. And another quick tip is I frequently will disable comments, so you can hide HTML comments and then show HTML comments in there, because a lot of times if you're like trying to like navigate around, they really get in the way. So you can just show and hide them.
How did you do that?
So what I'm doing here is I'm on a Mac. Are you on a Mac, or do you do Windows?
I am. I'm on
Cool.
a Mac.
So if you open up Chrome Developer Tools, you hold Command-Shift-P, and it will bring up what's called a command palette, and it's like the most useful thing ever. So anything that you can like kind of navigate around, you can kind of do through this. So like you can even like switch to like a dark theme, you know, or back to a light theme, and it has like funny or fuzzy searching. You know, you can bring up the network panel. You know, oops, what did I do here? You know, you could bring up like the I don't know, performance or something like that, and you can get like pretty quick on going around like that. But in this particular case, you know, you can type in comments to hide HTML, or to show your comments and hide the comments, right? So anyway, that's like a little tidbit. So in this particular case right here, like if you turn on the settings that I have in my custom.services, where did that go? Custom.services. This debug true right here, this debug true will turn on these HTML comments right here, and they're really, really useful, because it will tell you, let me do a command minus down here so we can see. It'll tell you what the suggestions are and what's being used. So you can see here, like right now there's an X next to region -- footer.html.twig. That means that's being used. The fallback, if that did not exist, would be like region.html.twig. We can look up at like the menu system up here. You can see like there's a you know, menu -- main that's being used, and you know, the fallback would be menu.html.twig. This is listed twice for some reason, I'm not quite sure why. And you can kind of see things like that. So this right here gives you the ability to, number one, know what twig file you need to be messing around with, right? And once you have that, you can use Xdebug, if we ever get it working, to actually know what to type, you know. But and once we turn off like the auto reload and caching, and turn off all the caching, you can be certain that as soon as you modify a twig file and you reload, that change will show immediately without doing a drush CR. Does that all kind of make sense?
Yeah.
When I started Drupal, this was like the biggest pain in the, or like Drupal 8 theming, this is like one of the biggest pain in the butts, you know. It's like there's like so many multi-levels of caching.
Well, not only that, but using the Twig debug, you know, first time I used it with console, and then I switched to just putting it in the settings.local.php, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a big fan of just, like, I have just like my settings.php, I just have it up on like a gist, and I just copy and paste it whenever I set it up, you know.
Right.
It's pretty straightforward. But
yeah, a lot of things have changed since Drupal 8 first came out, as far as doing things. You know, first that it took me a while to figure it all out, because it's like, do it this way. Oh no, don't do it that way anymore. Do it this way instead. And then it just happened like 3 or 4 times. It's like, okay.
It's like fashion.
Yeah.
You know, things go in and out of style. But like Drupal 8 is also changing pretty quickly in general. You know, like especially with like media and layout builder, and there's so much stuff going in now. Like the best practices do continue to evolve. The Twig Debug, though, has been around since the beginning of Drupal 8, and it's even available in Drupal 7. If you're like, I think it's like Drupal 7.33 or something, I think is when it was introduced. There's a setting in your settings.local.php with Drupal 7 where you can turn that on. And when I say Twig debugging, it's like template debugging, or I don't know what they call it, but it should be called template debugging, not Twig. Yeah, so those were kind of the three main things I wanted to go over. I think I think the main one, unfortunately, we weren't able to get to work, but I'm going to get that to work, and I'm going to record it just to maybe show it, and maybe I'll record it and kind of save it for a backup. So when I do go to Atlanta, if I can't get it working, I could just play the video and like narrate over it. I think that would be a really smart thing to do.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So, but do you have any questions or anything that would like anything that's pertinent that you have questions on as far as Drupal front end theming ish type stuff?
No, I'll probably think of some later. But can you invite me to that Slack channel? I don't think I'm on that one.
I would just post it in the Florida channel. You're in there, right?
Am I? I don't know.
And what's your
LS Cook.
I just pinged you. Should be there.
Oh, okay. All right, thanks.
This JavaScript 30 course that I brought up right here, like if you're not familiar with vanilla JavaScript, it's pretty awesome. There's a lot of different courses. Like the first one, you're gonna like if you've seen me do my lightning talks where I have like that little drum or like that little sound thing for my daughter. It was initially based off of this thing right here, this JavaScript drum kit right here. I like modified it and rewrote it like 6 times. But they're little like, I don't know, 20-minute videos show you how to build a JavaScript drum kit, show you how to build a clock, doing things like Ajax type ahead and stuff like that. And it's completely free. It's kind of fun because you're actually building something, as opposed to like if you get like a JavaScript book, which we probably all have, and they say this is an array, this is how an array works, this is all the methods that are available on the array. You should use it like this if you have this situation. You should use it like this if you have this situation. And you're like, okay, that's great. I'm never going to remember this.
Right.
But if you actually like start building stuff and then you kind of see it in action, it's really good. It really helps internalize things. So I highly recommend this. And then there's some like the same teacher, his name is Wes Boss. He gives a number of he has a number of four pay courses too. This is kind of like a really cool course, and it kind of gets you hooked. But and then there's other courses, including like a modern JavaScript and React courses and stuff that you're like, oh, I really like his teaching style, and that's kind of his stick, but it works, So I would like if you're interested in learning some modern JavaScript, I would recommend starting here. It'll get you kind of a little excited about it, and then from there you can just like just start building stuff and like looking at documentation, but this course will get you over the hump a little bit.
Great. Yeah, I've taken some JavaScript courses, but I don't know. I don't think I got a whole lot out of them.
We'll start this. So like if you were to go into this like right here, let me log in. So I should be able to log in right here. These are the courses I've done. So you can kind of see like the format right here. There's the JavaScript drum course. And you can see like this is 20 minutes long right here. And going through there, he walks you through all this type of stuff and why he's doing it. And as you're doing it, you can kind of see like he's working, in like, dev tools. You can see, oh, that's how you do that in dev tools, and you can like, see how the console works and things like that. It's pretty interesting.
Great.
So that's my pitch if you're into that type of stuff.
Okay.
which it's just kind of fun. So, okay. Well, I'm gonna I'm gonna have to work on this a little bit, and I'm gonna record what I have, and when I do, I will let you know, and then we can kind of put it all together for maybe this video. So.
Okay. Well, thanks.
But yeah, thanks for joining, Linda and Sarah, and have a good evening.
You
Thanks,
too.
you too.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.